welcome to FreightWaves Today. I am here with my co-host, Max Fuller. We have Matt Leffler that is going to join us here shortly to talk about what we're seeing around freight. This is July 2nd. It is the last day before the 4th. It's America's 250, Dad.
It's 250, and it's really great. Yeah,
it is. It does feel great. Do you think American patriotism, did you see the World Cup, by the way?
I did see the World Cup, and it's pretty exciting.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I feel like patriotism, I feel like it was this period over the last decade, and maybe over the last 2 decades since the Iraq War, where there's been this like America guilt and like patriotism was frowned upon. But I think like we're back.
I think we're back, and if you look at especially how the America's team is playing, it's really good.
Yeah, America's team is played, and look, we're a warring nation. We've been at war for, believe it or not, 235 years of our 250. So, but America is great now. There has been so many fantastic memes about the referee and the red card and our player being dejected. And a lot of American patriots are calling for B-2 bombers to take out some of those refs. I don't know that that's allowed. We'll hear from Matt Leffler whether whether that is something that is frowned upon or accepted. Matt, what are your thoughts there? Should we bring the? What are you doing, brother?
Let's not call for violence. Let's call for peace. I can hear you. There's a lot of lag, unfortunately.
That was a significant lag. We'll figure out what's going on the production side there. Look, it feels great to be America. It does feel like the America freight economy is roaring and ripping back, and we're going to talk about that on the Sonar Update. Is just how strong the rail data is telling us about the American industrial renaissance. We're seeing it across the country. Bulk commodities are moving. Bulk commodities are moving. We've got a lot of great things. Intermodal is strong. And look, the trucking market is something that has been strong all year, and there's nothing, and I mean nothing slowing it down. We're going to talk about all that here on today's show. We're going to go through and really dive into some of we got regulation to talk about, legal, and then we're going to finish up today with another great episode of Freight Expectations, and we'll get Leffler's audio fixed here shortly. But right up next is the headlines.
We kick things off with a massive shift in how freight contract pricing is getting done. Triumph, the Dallas-based transportation finance and technology company, launched RFP Manager on Tuesday to help brokers keep pace with drastically compressed pricing cycles. In today's supply-constrained market, some shippers are now repricing contracts as frequently as every 30 days, a brutal acceleration from the traditional annual or even 18-month cycles. The tool draws on real transaction and carrier payment data from the Triumph network, which according to the company provides visibility into about 70% of North American brokered freight transactions and payments tied to more than 170,000 carriers. Triumph's Executive Vice President Ben Volkwin explained that supply has been constrained to a large degree, and brokers are pushing up rates a lot higher and a lot faster than anyone would have expected, leaving shippers scrambling to keep contracts competitive. Over in the legal arena, a major case on broker transparency is headed to oral arguments that could reshape the entire industry. The lawsuit involving carrier Pink Cheetah versus Total Quality Logistics, the second biggest brokerage in the nation, is scheduled for oral arguments in Washington on September 11th, before the U.S. Appeals Court for the District of Columbia. The case centers on a disagreement over broker disclosure requirements after Pink Cheetah requested certain documents involving loads it hauled for TQL and then sued when TQL rejected further requests. According to the Pink Cheetah brief, the records that were eventually released revealed that the carrier received only 56% of the payment for the load in question, with TQL extracting approximately 40% commission rather than the reasonable and customary amount of about 14% to 16%. The case has broader implications for the entire question of broker transparency across the freight industry. Finally, North America's signature trade pact is entering an uncertain future after the Trump administration declined to renew it in its current form. The U.S. informed Mexico and Canada on Wednesday that it would not agree to extend the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement in its current form, triggering annual reviews until the issues are resolved or the pact expires in 2036. Despite the decision, USMCA remains in force while negotiations continue, and bilateral negotiations between the U.S. and Mexico are scheduled to resume during the week of July 20th. The decision comes despite North American trade reaching historic highs, with U.S.-Mexico two-way trade totaling a record $872.83 billion in 2025, and U.S.-Canada trade reaching $712.76 billion last year. For the trucking industry, the agreement governs hundreds of billions of dollars in cross-border freight, moving annually through major gateways such as Laredo, Texas, Detroit-Windsor, Buffalo, Niagara, and Otay Mesa, California.
Yeah, so lots going on. This whole trade story, we had Liberation Day tariffs, we sort of USMCA is NAFTA 2.0, if you will. President said he's not going to sign it. Any thoughts there, Dad?
Well, I think he's really looking for more of a fair balance, and that's what he's trying to do with the tariffs. And I really think that some of these smaller countries have really taken advantage of the United States through some of these.
But I'm not talking about smaller countries. What I'm talking specifically about is Canada and Mexico.
Right.
They're major trading partners of the United States. It feels
They
foolish. Matt, what are your thoughts here? Can you hear me, by the way? Do you have audio? Nope, we don't have audio for Matt, so.
No.
There you are. I got the audio.
You can hear me now. Look at us go. Okay, can you hear me now? Look, happy birthday, America. Happy birthday, America. We're well on our way. Let's start more fights. That's the way to solve our problems. Let's do that.
I like the flags. I like you're very patriotic. By the way, I like the change. I know what's we used to be up there. I will tell you that is beautiful. It brings tears to my eyes. So Matt, what are your thoughts on USMCA?
I mean, look, we need these trade agreements. Those are our two largest trading partners. They share a lot of our cultural similarities. We need consistency and predictability. Those supply chains are always able to be nimble. We'll make do without these agreements, but we have to get back to the table. We have to have agreements with our biggest trading partners. That's just common sense. Now, I understand why some things have been sidelined for a little bit. We'll see if that changes over the days and weeks to come, but really we need to have these agreements. And I don't think we need to pick more fights with our neighbors.
It does feel foolish. If you want to bring reindustrialization, you need Canadian commodities, you need Mexican labor. That's what you benefit from, because there's a lot of the high labor intensive jobs that frankly are not value added to our economy that we need to be able to use our trading partners in Mexico. And then Canada has got a fantastic commodity core. If you want to talk about reindustrialization, it feels like bringing it back to the Americas is the biggest element. I am all about moving manufacturing and redeploying supply chains away from China because it is a strategic enemy. It is a massive risk. I don't have that same thought on Canada and Mexico. I think we actually need those countries to really help us prop up our domestic sourcing manufacturing.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the reality is a lot of manufacturing in the United States is in correlation and connection with manufacturing happening in Mexico and in Canada. You look at the supply chains for the big truck manufacturers or the big car manufacturers, the trailer manufacturers. This requires North American cooperation, and that is all about Canada, United States, and Mexico. So hopefully this gets resolved. There's a lot of stuff to get excited about. That, unfortunately, is not something I'm super excited about, but if we get a deal put together, that's what we want. That's what we need. Lower barriers trade continues to keep supply chains moving.
Well, we got a lot to talk about, Matt. A lot of Supreme Court decisions. We will get to it on freight expectations. But let's move on. Let's talk to, we've got our next guest, our first guest of the day, because Matt is not a guest, he's a resident here. He's a permanent resident here at FreightWaves today. We have Doug Marcello. He is the attorney with Saxton and Stump. Doug, the hottest topic in freight today is all of the court decisions that's why we keep bringing lawyers here, because you guys always have a perspective on what's happening. And for our audience, this is the best deal on TV. It's free, non-billable hours to you. Doug, what are your thoughts on the Supreme Court decision with the state trial? And I'm getting some really weird back noise.
You broke up at the end, Craig, in terms of the Supreme Court decision on the with regard to Montgomery case.
Yeah, can you give us some sense for We seem to be having some electrical issues. Doug, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so tell us a little what your thoughts are on the Supreme Court decision with C.H. Robinson.
I think the C.H. Robinson decision is going to be earth-shaking. The original reports or the evaluations were no big deal. I think that's totally wrong. It's a situation where it is going to greatly change the insurance demands and needs of the brokers as well as the trucking companies. It's going to put, and I think this is a good thing, put quality over quantity with regard to the analysis of the trucking companies. And I'm seeing now stories where providers, carriers are saying that they believe it's going to be an increase with regard to their dedicated routes, so that as we move away from the carriers, the 75% or 95% rather, that are unscored, that don't have a rating, those are what we're going to see.
I've lost audio on Doug. Matt, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can still hear you guys. And I heard what Doug was saying. I mean, I think he's absolutely right. The impact of Montgomery, I mean, first of all, the Supreme Court does not take cases on that are not important. When they take a case on, it has deep societal implications for the area of law that it's discussing. And when Montgomery dropped, yes, it's true. Some of the appellate courts had already found, generally speaking, that brokers can be held liable for this negligent selection. But now this is ubiquitous across all 50 states. If you are a broker and you hire a motor carrier and that motor carrier gets into an accident, you will be sued. And just like the C.H. Robinson case in Florida, even if you're not part of the litigation, you might still get sued. And so for brokers out there and for motor carriers, understand that insurance markets do not quite understand yet how to incorporate this new Supreme Court ruling, but this is going to have a very long-lasting impact, and brokers are already feeling that pressure. I know that for a fact.
Doug, are you with us? Did we get you back?
I am.
Okay, so Doug, sorry, I could not hear what you were saying. I don't know if our audience could. I couldn't. Can you repeat what you were saying?
Sure. On the lines with Matt, I think we're in agreement. Huge impact, contrary to what people's initial reaction is going to be. Situation where it's going to impact, number one, requiring brokers to look at quality over quantity. Is it a good carrier versus what's their rate?
We've got some audio problems. We have some audio problems with Doug. So Matt, we're going to try to fix the audio problem with Doug and go directly to you. So Matt, let's talk about Supreme Court and what you're hearing in terms of, or what you're seeing. Is this impacting the insurance market?
Yeah, I mean, for the motor carriers that are out there with their insurance already, nothing really changes for them. What I do think happening, at least right now, C.H. Robinson put out a public release saying, hey, here's how we're going to evaluate motor carriers going forward. They're inquiring higher levels of insurance for their motor carrier partners. I think that's a trend we're absolutely going to get to continue to see. So motor carriers that work with brokers, there might be some added pressure to increase your limits. And then for the brokers, if you weren't carrying some sort of contingent auto or third-party liability, knock on the door of an insurance company, because you're going to need to start carrying that. There's no way around this. You're going to be sued, and every time a case happens, you want that insurance company to step in and defend you, and if you're found to be liable, to indemnify you. So yeah, this is a very interesting time in the Supreme Court. Craig, it's been busy this week. It's been a very busy time at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so I think the conversation really is about what the issues are with brokers in terms of how are they dealing with this issue. Can you talk a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so brokers are having to run the same challenges that they've been running with for many years, which is how am I going to navigate this new level of potential liability? And the way that you do that as a broker, and again, let me be very clear, do not take legal advice from FreightWaves Live or FreightWaves Now or FreightWaves Any. Don't take legal advice from me. If you think you need a lawyer, you probably do. It's not me unless, of course, you pay me. But here's the reality. If you are a broker and you have not started to incorporate the Montgomery world into your process, you better do that yesterday. And what that means is you have written documentation of how you vet motor carriers. That is not something you can ever deviate from. You keep that consistent, and you keep trekking out and looking at newer technologies. Work with your insurance company, obviously, and your shipper partners are going to be very eager to understand how you are helping them navigate this potential liability.
Yeah, there's one question I've had being a motor carrier. We had to carry high levels of insurance. At U.S. Express, we had $300 million. We'd get involved in an accident, and the guy that had $20 million, they'd sue him for $20 million, but they'd sue us for the $300 million. What how do the insurance companies look at that? And then what is the legal differential between the large carriers and small carriers in that case?
Man, that's a great question. That's a great question. So when you are thinking about like how plaintiff attorneys think about who they sue and how much they sue for. Some of the first things you're going to find out as a plaintiff attorney is who is the insurance company that is carrying for the motor carrier, and you're going to ask them, what is your policy limit? What's your declarations page say? You're going to, generally speaking, as a defense attorney, you produce that right off the bat. Here's who the insurance company is. Here's the policy number. Here's the date of loss. And generally speaking, lawyers are going to ask for the policy limit. They're going to say, just tender the policy. I want that. Now, you still have to prove damages. Like, it's not just how much does the insurance company have you insured for? It's really, what is the damages you have? What kind of economic damages do you have? What kind of physical damages you have? And you have to prove your damages, including pain and suffering or loss of consortium when some loved one can't be with you anymore. These are all things that get put together when you look at how much you're going to ask for. Some lawyers will ask for just a number above X, so over 750,000 or over 75,000, whatever they want. But realistically, you must prove your damages. Now, when it comes to actual findings of liability, once we have a number, it depends on the jurisdiction, but some of them are what we call joint and several liability, meaning if you're on the hook for a part of the damages, you're on the hook for all the damages. This is why for brokers it's so interesting right now, because you may have a motor carrier who has $750,000 of liability insurance and the damages are $10 million, and you are found liable in some form or fashion, they'll come at you for the remainder of that balance. So this is why these numbers are so fascinating. You want to pay attention to them because ultimately that's what makes us lawyers chase the big cases, because there's a lot of insurance at play typically.
Now, I guess to follow up, one question I've got is, if you're a motor carrier and you do carry that bigger tower, is that really creating the fact that you're going to be sued for more? And that's the way it appears to be, at least from my side.
Oh man, you and I again. I'm with you, Max. Like the cynical answer is like, yes, of course. Like if I find out that you have a $5 million policy and I have $1 million of damages, I'm going to ask you for $5 million. And you're going to come back with your lawyers and say, hey, that's not reasonable. Here's the facts that show we shouldn't have to pay this. So that is part of the story that we get heard over the last couple of decades is if we raise it, then we're going to have more types of liability and it's going to be higher numbers. I actually disagree. Now, I'm not a statistician. I'm not a Jason Miller or a Ken Adamo type. I'm not a data guy like Craig, but I'll say this. The number has been consistent for the last 40 years, and it has not been increased in 40 years. And many organizations want to see more people on the road, and they want to see more trucking companies paying insurance premiums. If you raise that limit, and we absolutely must raise that limit, a lot of capacity exits the business. So insurance companies really don't want to see these numbers go up. But if you talk to defense attorneys, the lawyers who protect trucking companies and brokerages, they almost all uniformly say, we need to have higher minimum limits of liability because these cases are not $1 million. These cases are more than that. And ultimately, if you underinsure yourself as a company, they're coming for you personally. They'll take your house, they'll take your trucks, they'll take your cars, unless you have really good protections. But underinsuring a business is one of the easiest ways to pierce a corporate veil. So it's a really interesting question, Max. And I would say this, we need to raise it. And yes, the lawyers will ask for more. We have to create tort reform to help curb that broader trend of things rising up. But we have to ensure the risk that we create.
So Matt, yesterday we had a plaintiff's attorney on FreightWaves Today who was the word tort reform. I thought he was going to come through the screen and kill us both. Did not want to talk about tort reform, naturally so. Do we have Doug? Doug, we got the audio thing, I think, I'm told, from our production crew. So we're good now. Let's hear what you have to say about tort reform. What do you think about that?
The biggest thing we need in America today, you know, in today's political environment, Craig, the biggest topic in politics is affordability. Well, according to the Chamber of Commerce study, the lack of tort reform, excessive tort liability, is creating a $4,200 tax on every family in America. Now, if any politician says I can give you a $4,200 tax break, they would jump on it at a heartbeat. I think we need to do that because also what we're seeing is it's not the nuclear verdicts that are the real story. It is the bulk of the iceberg under the headlines. It's the nuclear settlements. And where these nuclear verdicts are being leveraged as a potential risk, that these cases are being overly settled. Sedgwick just released a report this week. Over the last 5 years, the severity of verdicts only went up 3.7%, about the same as inflation. But they found that the severity of settlements went up 12%, almost fourfold. And a lot of that is driven by the risk aversion with regard to a potential for a nuclear verdict out there, and that can only be dealt with by tort reform.
Doug, I got to ask your opinion on the most ridiculous thing I've seen all week, which is this C.H. Robinson was sued in this U-turn lawsuit in the state of Florida. They weren't even involved. They had years. What are your thoughts there? By the way, our plaintiff attorney that was here yesterday actually said it was irresponsible, which I agree, and was pretty hard on the plaintiff's attorney. But what are your thoughts?
Appropriately so. Craig, I heard your story when we were talking to John about that. I think you used a legal phrase that even made John blush coming from Kansas City. But I totally agree.
It is absolute bullshit. You are allowed to say this. We're not governed by the FCC, I don't think. Although that may, I don't know, Matt, you may have opinions on whether the FCC could say anything or not, but
no
the reality is like, you could say it. It's bullshit. It's bullshit that C.H. Robinson was brought into this. And look, it's okay to you naturally have the right to sue them if they're involved in the transaction. And like, I think let the courts do their thing. We can all argue tort reform, but that seems like it's a risk they take that they're in the market, and certainly a heightened risk with Montgomery. But bringing them into a lawsuit, what is your read on that? Is this just an irresponsible attorney that doesn't understand trucking?
Yes. We have in your discussion with John, you talked about the repercussions. We have, and Matt, I think we look at Rule 11 for the federal courts. Pennsylvania, we have a provision that if someone brings a lawsuit that is obdurate, vexatious, and brought in bad faith, we can collect attorney's fees from it. The problem is we usually have to go through a preset ritual before that. To put them on notice, we're going to come after you, and that gives them a chance to bail out on it. But yeah, to bring suit against somebody without any indication or at least some justification on it, just to, as you and John discussed the other day, because they think there's a deep pocket there, we're going to roll the dice and see if we can get it. Yeah, that's just wrong.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And like I said, I guess C.H. Robinson handles something like 1 out of every 12 truckloads, and I get they get big pockets. And I get that the chances are, I mean, if you just look at we're just taking chances, is an asymmetric risk that they're involved. But it just seems like an attorney that just doesn't understand trucking. They maybe heard the word C.H. Robinson and said, hey, chances are involved, I'll file suit against them. Like it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, what I will say is that go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt. I was going to say, it's easy enough. This was filed, early on, soon after the accident occurred. So they can do a modicum of discovery, still have plenty of time under the statute of limitations to bring in the applicable party that's involved in it. And in fact, many of the documents, be it the bill of lading or otherwise, are probably in possession of law enforcement that they can access in order to identify who the real players are, be it a broker or shipper.
Yeah, I just want to mention, this is the process working correctly, right? So they named the wrong defendant, the defendant filed for motion to dismiss, and it was dismissed immediately. And there's no chance it looks like that they're going to try to bring CH back. So ultimately, this is how the process works. Lawyers are fallible. We all make mistakes. Some make more than others. I've certainly made plenty in my career, but it's important to note, give grace when you can. This might have been in bad faith. If it is in bad faith, then absolutely those types of actions can be sanctionable. You can retrieve your attorney's fees, presumably. But for someone like CH, my feeling is their internal legal team's this is nonsense. That's motion to dismiss, off to the next one as they go down the list of active cases. But yeah, it happens, unfortunately.
So Dick, I got to ask Max commented about the fact that if you increase the insurance levels, it just makes it that much more attractive. Puts a big bullseye. What are your thoughts? Final thoughts?
I think that's where it's going to come, Craig, is the increased limits are going to make more. As your father said, the more you have, the more folks come after. It's always a tough question. People ask me, how much should I have? A lot of that's a function of what are your assets and what's your risk tolerance. because you're going to see a variety out there, but you're going to see the plaintiffs try to go after you if you have that money, and that's what they're going to push for.
Yeah, I mean, if you do raise insurance levels, the question is, do you end up with more lawsuits? Because I don't think anyone really wants that. And we've talked, Doug, you and I spoken about this, about the fact that there's a bunch of frivolous filings that ends up actually costing everybody. That's a huge issue.
I think it's a binary process. If you're going to increase the rates, you got to increase tort reform, because we're living in a world right now that's described in New York as a fraudemic, where there are staged accidents. We've seen it in New Orleans down there. We have a situation where there is these frivolous lawsuits, minor impact side swipes, and people in New York are claiming not only the back and neck normal things, but now claiming torn ACLs and rotator cuffs and getting surgery on all of them. I think that has to be coupled together in a comprehensive package to bring this together.
Well, look, love to have you back. Sorry about that. Some of these audio issues that we'll get next time. Doug, great to see you. I hope that you come back. This is such value to our viewers, such value to our audience of getting not free legal advice, as Matt likes to say. If you need a lawyer, you don't need to be listening to people on TV. But it's great because we're giving you so many insights, and the action is going to continue. Next up, we have Chris Ingram. He's the service technician going to this Volvo Championship we're going to hear more about. We'll be right back.
It's National Safety Month, which makes this a great time to ask how your fleet can prevent more accidents. Samsara AI detects risks in real time, giving teams more visibility into what's happening on the road and more context to coach drivers before risky moments become incidents. Fleets using Samsara Complete AI Safety Solution have reduced crash rates by nearly 75%. See the data behind the results in the Samsara Safety Report at samsara.com/FreightWaves.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara Driving Coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
So American reindustrialization is all the talk. It's America 250, lots of excitement there. As we dive into the freight market, let's go look at the railroads because they tell us a lot about what we're seeing in freight and in the industrial economy. America's industrial sector is absolutely continuing to ramp. We're seeing this in the data. We look at the rail data every single week. This tells us a lot about the commodities that go into the industrial segments. The volume of transactions, the volume of freight that's shipped across the railroads tells us a lot about the health of the industrial sector. And what it's telling us and what it's affirming to us is that that sector is continuing to see significant increases and significantly more demand. We're seeing this across the commodity spectrum, and I think it's promising for U.S. industrial and U.S. manufacturing in the next couple of months. The reason that I say that is that if you want to build things, if you're going to produce things, if you're going to manufacture things, then you need to have raw materials, you need to have those source materials into your supply chain months in advance of production. And the reason that's important is that when we look out 6 months from now, what we're seeing in the rail volume data, in that commodity data, is telling us that we're going to get really strong industrial activity in the next couple of quarters as those commodities flow into manufacturing and production and they're put into use into finished goods products. Now, what I think is exceptionally exciting is the fact that some of the real heavy manufacturing, things related to things like steel production and heavy metals, is absolutely showing up in the data that we're seeing American-produced steel and American-produced materials are starting to really ramp. Go look at the coke data. Coke is a really important indicator. Coke is a fossil derivative. It is something used in heavy manufacturing of steel and other metals because it can get so hot. That is what coke is used for. It's used to really produce those real heavy metals, which is good for U.S. steel production. And what we're seeing across the other commodities is that the market is absolutely ramping. And one thing I've talked about is the fact that this freight market looks unlike any other freight market that we've ever tracked inside of Sonar. We've been tracking this data since 2018. And what has always sort of driven the freight market is that the coastal cities, the imports, really drive the pulse of the freight market. You could look at Southern California and you would see what was likely to happen across the United States a couple of months later. That's no longer the case. The Midwest, the Southeast, Texas are producing the freight. They're the ones that are showing us what's actually happening in the freight market. They're the ones that are giving us the indicators on the strength of this freight market. It's happening along I-35, it's happening down to Texas, and it's telling us that things are actually pretty good and will continue to be pretty good. So watch the rail data. We post it every single Wednesday, and it's really, in my opinion, the most important day of the week because it tells us a lot about demand and it strips a lot of the anomalies out of the trucking data because you don't have just the number of drivers. There's a lot of questions about the regulatory crackdown. I use rail data to sort of keep us honest. And what it's telling us is that things are actually quite robust. And I think it's sort of fitting that this American reindustrialization story is happening at the same time that America is celebrating its 250th anniversary. We are bringing manufacturing back. We're bringing production back. We're going to see it ramp through the rest of the year. There's no signs of a slowdown. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Things are firming, and that's exciting. We're up 7% year over year. I think that's one of the best indicators of just how robust this freight economy is. Now, one thing I will talk about is tender rejections. Tender rejections fell off at the end of the week. It really caught us by surprise, certainly caught me by surprise. The tender rejections softened this week. I expected them to ramp and actually firm. It didn't happen. I think my read on that is that July 4th really happened at the end of the week. It's really the weekend. And I think a lot of shippers probably didn't move as much freight
this week as they will next week. We heard from David Spencer on FreightWaves today that a lot of shippers are stacking freight for next week. So next week will be pretty robust. Drivers will be off duty. They probably didn't want their freight sitting on trucks over the long weekend, and that's okay. But that does mean next week will be pretty good. Expect that to happen. What we're seeing, though, is that it's the Midwest, it's the Southeast, it's Texas that are doing exceptionally well. That's where the freight is happening. Import market is coming back. We've talked about imports building. This is going to be a good import season. That will take us into the second half. That will really ramp as we get closer and closer to Christmas. Really, we'll start to see it ramp in really the end of this month and all the way into October, with really October and early November being pretty robust. So I think the freight market is incredibly strong. American reindustrialization is absolutely happening. We're seeing it in the data. And if you have no doubt, if you're just like, look, this is just a trucking capacity story and just a regulatory crackdown story, go look at the rail data, because it tells us the truth. It tells us a lot about the industrial segment. And there is no doubt that America industrial segment is ramping and America reindustrialization is happening, and it's so exciting.
America's back, baby, for 250, Dad. I got to get your thoughts on this. So I've talked about since 2018, we've been tracking this data at FreightWaves. And really what it used to be was that you would see the imports flow into, I'm talking 2018, imports would flow into the coast. And then, in a couple of weeks, you would see it into the center of the country. The center of the country was consuming freight, but not producing a lot of it. You've been around this industry for your whole life. You literally have diesel in your blood. What did the market look like 10, 20 years ago? Because, early 2000s when I was running a board, it felt like the Midwest and the Southeast was where freight originated.
Well, actually, if you go back, I've been in the industry for 55 years, and so I saw the rush to China, and if you look at where most of the freight was being generated before that, it's really into Rust Belt, and then somewhat Texas. And I think what you're seeing right now is a lot of that's coming back. So we're seeing the reindustrialization probably of our country, which is probably good for the next couple generations.
Yeah, a lot of that is AI data centers definitely driving it. But, if you're going to construct an AI data center, which is driving millions of truckloads, we have a great, we call separation report inside of Sonar. You can also get it part of Market Monitor. Go to getfreightdata.com. Every single executive in the space should have some access to Sonar's data, because it tells you everything that's going on. And really, yes, some of this is being driven by AI data centers, some of this reindustrialization. But you know what? I don't care. And the reason I don't care, it's American steel, it's American concrete, it's American goods on American flatbeds and American van trailers. That's all that matters. And for America 250, feels like we're back, baby. Talking about coming back, we're going to hear from Chris Ingram. He's our next guest. He is a service technician at Beaver Truck Center, and he's headed to Sweden to go show the Europeans how America does it. Welcome. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Actually, you're a North American. I apologize to that. I do apologize. This is American patriotism. I'm so sorry. I don't know that I can root for you, though. I gotta tell you, you root for the Americans. Tell us why you. Canada's number 2, Chris. I apologize about that.
No, that's all good. Same team, right?
What's that?
The same team stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Hey, look, it's all about North America. Tell us about this championship that you're going to in Sweden.
Sure thing. Well, it's Volvo Vista, which stands for Service Training Award. Basically, it's a competition they've been running since 1957, every 2 years. The competition runs for about 8 or 9 months on those years, and over a course of a bunch of rounds, and there's testing and largely based on electrical diagnostics, information finding. The top teams are then asked to go and compete in Sweden. The 2024 competition actually had 4,000 teams globally coming out of, I think, 109 countries. So of those 4,000 teams, 44 advanced to the finals. So it's pretty important in the Volvo community for sure.
So, Chris, what does it take to win? What is the actual, what's the criteria? What does it take to win?
Well, there's a lot of dedication. I mean, it's nice that they put that carrot out there for people in this trade to really be able to excel if you want to. The testing, like I said, there's a lot of troubleshooting related queries, a lot of information finding. It does take a full team effort and a lot of dedication to get into it.
So is this a speed thing? Is it like NASCAR and it's how fast you can diagnose the issues, or is it something completely different?
No, they're certainly all timed. You're not allowed an infinite number of minutes for all of these things. But in the finals, obviously, the stress is even more so there. On the team there that you can see from the left to the right, that's Cameron Glass, Sergio Galdamez, Randall Wiebe, and then myself. Randall and I have both been to the finals before. Randall's actually been twice, a very smart man. So we have a little bit of experience on knowing what to expect. It is a very, very high stress situation. You know, you're doing your job, but you're doing your job with somebody with a clipboard writing down everything you do. So the stress is there for sure.
So Chris, does each country get represented as sort of like the Olympics or World Cup?
There's, as far as the rest of the world goes, I don't know. For North America, there was 3 teams that were accepted. This year, there was 2 from Canada and 1 from the United States that are going to represent. In past years, there's been different ratios, but that's how the chips landed this year.
Well, I know this is important to you, and look, ultimately, as Matt Leffler likes to remind us, maintenance is super important, and having the best techs in the world is super important to keep these trucks running. Matt, any thoughts on this? We don't have audio on Matt. Man, our audio game is just not great today. I think I feel like America 250 isn't giving us, maybe all these fireworks and this heat is just cutting off our audio.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. The contest that he's going to is kind of the elite of the elite. And if you look at the service technicians in this country or North America, they are behind the scenes. They're the ones that keep the equipment running. They're the ones that basically enhance safety along the way. So these guys, are very important to keeping this industry moving.
Now, have you been to this event?
I've not been to the event, but I've been to some similar.
Okay, and
it's
so
kind of the Super Bowl of their industry.
What exactly, as a spectator, what exactly do you see?
Well, they're looking for accuracy, speed, and then the ability to diagnose things that some people can't find.
Gotcha. And Chris, what are your thoughts? I mean, is this a spectator sport?
Well, it's maybe if you were interested in that kind of thing, for sure.
I know Matt and Max are. I know Leffler is interested because he loves some maintenance. So does Max, my dad. His superpower and his focus was always equipment. So something that he is very passionate about.
Well, it would interest the hell out of me, but it's not for everybody. We'll say that.
Is this like an event? Can we film it? Is it that exciting?
I believe that there are cameras rolling throughout the event. Yeah.
We need some B-roll. I think it would be great to show our audience what this actually looks like.
It's a lot of guys that are operating under stress that normally don't operate under stress. So there's a lot of sweat.
I imagine, I watch these NASCAR maintenance contest ad, and they're like, the speed at which is very impressive.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Now, how much of the maintenance has changed a lot over the last couple decades? Most of it's computerized maintenance today, or a good portion of it is actually plugging the truck into a computer. Is this part of it, Chris? Are you having to diagnose the issues that are embedded in the software?
Well, it's an all-over kind of thing, to be honest. I mean, the trade and the background has changed so much over the past few years. I mean, you mentioned NASCAR. We're not racing to change tires on these things. You do that twice, you're going to be broken. But it's the components are huge the way that they always have been, except now there's a whole pile more of the technology that's into it. So the guys in this trade, I mean, they're they're not dumb. They've had to evolve pretty heavily. There's a lot of in-depth troubleshooting. I mean, the technology that's in heavy trucks these days rivals, what's in normal cars. So it's there's a lot that they've had to really pull up their socks on to be able to stay valid in the trade.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
yeah, if you look at how the industry's changed over the last 20 years, you used to be able to use a test light to be able to diagnose problems. Today, you've got to have a pretty sophisticated computer to help you diagnose.
Yeah.
Big change.
Can I ask Chris a question? Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes,
Chris, here's the thing I want to mention for everyone that's listening to this. For doctors working on humans, it's had the same model for hundreds of thousands of years. But trucks, every single year, it's a brand new model, new components, new software, new technology. And for people that are in this field is working on heavy duty trucks and trailers, it is brutal on your body. And so what Chris and his team are doing is they're going to a competition where they're going to be tested against the rest of the world for diagnosing and repairing types of trucks. So the American Trucking Association does a super tech kind of similar. But this is the question I have for you, Chris, and I'm sure you get this all the time. When is my truck going to be done?
Waiter's going to wait. No, I'm just kidding. It's... Goodness, with the way the diagnostics are nowadays, I mean, you do your best to get it out the door as quick as you can, right? It's completely different. Automotive, yeah, you have somebody's vehicle. It sucks. They have to take an Uber today. You got somebody's truck in the shop. They're not making any money. So the game's a little different. We get it back as quick as we can. That's always the goal.
So
One of the
Chris,
things
go ahead, Matt.
I say one of the challenges we've seen, not just with truck drivers, but with the repair and maintenance industry, is we've told people across the globe and across North America, hey, if you become a diesel mechanic, you're not going to be successful. But there's incredible jobs in this space. How are you finding technicians? Where are you finding people that have the aptitude and the attitude to safely repair commercial vehicles?
That's $1 million question. We are constantly looking for good people. And I mean, you typically don't know what you got until they're working for you. So it is definitely an ongoing challenge, we'll say. But it's something, we're always looking for good people to come into the trade.
So Chris, unfortunately, we got to go. I got one last question. European trucks or North American trucks? You like the conventionals or cab overs? I know which my preference.
Well, I'll take conventional all day long, 100%, but that's not where we're going to be tested on. So we're going to have to pull up our socks a little bit with the cab overs. But no, my personal preference, put a hood in front of me. Yep.
What do you think, Max?
Oh, I love conventionals.
Oh, come on. The cab over is the way to go. It's the ruler. It's the boss. It goes hard. And we'll be right back with you with Lewie, Pugh, with OOIDA.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
All right, you're in for a treat. We have Lewie Pugh. He is the Executive Vice President of OOIDA. And the reason I say this is a treat is we have Max Fuller, who was founder of a mega fleet. We have OOIDA, who represents owner-operators. Max was involved with the ATA. Lewie, I don't know if you guys have ever talked to each other, but I know that you come from different worlds. We're going to bring it together and talk about it. How are you doing, Lewie?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend, and I like you intro it as a treat. I wonder what your definition of a treat is.
Well, I mean, everyone's waiting for me to set up Fight Club. We're not going to do that today because we're all Americans. Unfortunately, our last guest was from Canada, and I didn't get the note on that. So, but I'm still rooting for North America because North America still has America in it.
Exactly.
It feels like they're the home team still, so that counts. So, Lewie, what is sort of top of mind in terms of concerns for you guys?
I mean, we're glad to see that the worm is finally starting to turn and freight rates are starting to come back. I mean, fuel prices, of course, are still a little thing. But, I mean, our main thing right now and focus is trying to get Congress and the Senate to move and let's get a highway bill done, or the Surface Transportation Act, as you may. This is where trucking legislation lives and dies. Of course, that's our number one thing around here, is advocating for trucking on Capitol Hill and in states. And this is kind of our Super Bowl. And it's just, we continue to kick this can down the road because of all this divisiveness in Congress. And it's a real shame because the American people are paying the price. And that's a shame because, I'm with you. It's the greatest country. I'm super stoked about this weekend, 250th anniversary of America. And it's also the 100th anniversary of Route 66. And that's what I'm doing on 4th of July, actually, is going to go ride on Route 66 for a little while on my motorcycle. So, great time.
There's nothing more American than Route 66. I mean, as the old classic American highway crossing that. So, Lewie, the highway bill's gotten a lot of attention. What is it you guys are hoping gets put into that highway bill and gets approved?
Well, we're already happy about what's gotten in there. First and foremost, of course, is truck parking. We have our Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, $750 million of funding to go to parking. As we all know, it's been a shortage for a long time. I jokingly laughed that the first time I ever went to D.C. to advocate, and I was a truck driver then, a small business carrier, was in 2006 for OOIDA, and it was on truck parking. And here we are 20 years later, still talking about truck parking. But, that's in there. That will be free. All these parking spots, because we know there's lots of people exploiting parking now to make money. And, I get it and I understand why. But with that being said, that would be free. Some other stuff we got in there is restroom access, which it's fascinating to me that in America we have to try to pass a law or a rule or whatever so shippers and receivers do the right thing and let the driver use their bathroom. But unfortunately, since COVID has become a huge issue, it's even worse for lady drivers, of course. So we're wanting to see that in there. And then it's doing some investigating on predatory lease scheme and changing that, because I'm sure you're well aware we're no fans of lease purchases. They don't turn out well for the driver. I jokingly say they advertise walk-away leasing, and they're right, because you're going to walk away, and you won't have a car, you won't have a home, you won't have anything, unfortunately. So those are some of the things that we're looking for and hoping that are already in there. We'd like to see some more stuff on training, more hours behind the wheel, and stuff like that. But they are starting to investigate that as well. They're supposed to set up, so that's good too.
Do you think we'll see the reversal of the ELDT, the entry-level driver training program, where hours are going to be mandated in terms of how many hours the drivers need to have before we can get a CDL?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say a reversal. I would like to say a add to it. We were part of the entry-level driver training conversation. One of my board members sat on that committee and helped shape that. We wanted the 30 hours behind the wheel. That got taken out at the last minute for whatever reason. Stupid, in my opinion. But hey, we'd like to see some more of that. We look at this entry-level driver training as a first step, a small first step. but we definitely need many more hours of behind the training, much stricter standards. I think all this stuff we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years with non-domicile CDLs, foreign drivers, folks who can't speak English, all these problems and accidents and things that we see are due to way too small amount of training for truckers.
I mean, it all comes back to an effort to lower the barriers to entry. I mean, that's where a lot of this has come. The ELDT, the entry-level driver training program, which really allowed for the proliferation of CDL mills, is something that has absolutely destroyed a lot of the training integrity in this industry, and it was taken advantage of. Lewie, what did happen to allow for the fact that there is no standard? I'm a pilot. Like I admit, I don't have a CDL. I've driven trucks, but never over the road. As a pilot, I gotta have 40 minimum hours before I can get my ticket, before I can even go and become a private pilot. And you're not proficient until a couple hundred hours. The data is very clear on this. How possibly can we expect truck drivers with no hours, proven hours in the cab, actually be trained and hit our nation's highways? How did that happen?
Everybody wants cheap freight, cheap labor, and we don't want to invest in drivers, invest in future. I mean, the American Trucking Association, and they're seems to change their tune, but they did a really good job since deregulation pushing this whole driver shortage narrative that we've never had. There's shortages in trucking, but it sure isn't drivers. We have 400,000 to 500,000 new CDLs issued every year, and people come in, and unfortunately, we've dumbed down this industry. We've dumbed down the truck driver. We don't want to pay them for what they do. We don't want to give them a safe place to park. There's all these problems out here, and we wonder why people don't stay. And it's unfortunate. And, I don't understand how it works. I don't understand how people can sleep at night to put people behind the wheel of a truck that they don't know how they're doing or what they're doing. And the way they try to remedy that is with these little safety gadgets and stuff that they put on the truck to help herd the cats from point A to point B. And it's maddening to me. And, I love trucking. I was a truck driver for 25 years. And I'm proud of my safety record. I'm proud of being a trucker. And it's really a shame what we've done to our industry.
All right. So, Dad, I got to ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot. First of all, is there a truck driver shortage?
It depends on how you want to define it. The definition of does all freight move creates a driver shortage, or is it a trucking company doesn't have enough drivers? And I really think that the whole problem is trucking companies don't have enough drivers, but the industry still moves all the freight that needs to be moved.
So how is that a driver shortage? Companies can have unseated trucks. That's a company-specific problem. I don't think anyone's going to argue that.
Right.
There were times you guys had unseated trucks. Your competitors have unseated trucks at times.
Right.
That is a trucking company-specific problem where you have a shortage of drivers.
That's correct.
It's very different than the market having a shortage of drivers. In fact, I grew up listening to or believing there was a perpetual truck driver shortage across the industry. And it was in 2019, I'll never forget it. I was looking at the data inside of Sonar, which, we publish this data that gives us this visualization, really easy to sort of see it. And I remember seeing we had the bloodbath of 2019, the largest level of bankruptcy since 2008. And yet I was hearing about this driver shortage, but yet we had too many drivers. I don't understand it. And I don't know why the the fleets that are out there and the ATA kept insisting there's a driver shortage. I get that you have unseated trucks. That's frustrating. But it comes down to the industry not having a driver shortage. Lee, what are your thoughts there?
I agree with you, and I think the reason that they pushed that for so long was to try to get a legislation and to keep out, where they have to invest in drivers, and they've been very successful at that. And I think that worm's starting to turn. I mean, if we want safe highways and safe roadways, and I think we do, I believe the first three things that we should be doing and putting all of our resources and efforts into, which will be expensive. Don't get me wrong, I know it. But we need to invest in the training of the people that we're putting behind the wheel. We need to pay them properly, whether that's by the hour, pay them overtime, however, because everything in trucking is regulated by time except for the driver's pay. And it's by piecework, which makes no sense. And then finally, we need to have safe places for them to park and rest. And if we would just address those three things, I firmly believe it would pay in dividends way beyond belief on highway safety for us.
All right, so So I want you to respond to Louie's comment about the fact that if you just paid more, if you just gave the drivers, tell us about the challenges that you guys deal with in recruiting drivers, and why have the larger carriers or the members of the ATA insisted that we change these barriers to entry? There has to be an economic reason for it.
Well, if you go back, when I first started in the industry in the 1970s, truck drivers were paid in the top 20% of all professions. If you look at them today, they're probably in the bottom 20%. Part of that has been created by deregulation. You go back to the training of drivers, where you try to get them in seats as fast as you can. We basically put together a program at US Express where you come out of a school, then you still have to go on a truck with another driver to actually get experience. And in a lot of cases, that was for about 60 days. So you get some experience in the markets that you're working in. I think all these things have to come together to come to a better solution for the driver if we're going to have quality drivers in the industry. But the industry that is paying them, the industry that's supporting them, needs to understand their issues along the way. And there's a lot of issues that drivers have that don't get addressed.
Well, look, I think we can all agree that better truck parking, better quality of life, bathrooms is something that, everyone that owns trucks really wants to see is our drivers are treated better by the motoring public and by the shippers and frankly brokers. I think everyone, I think you would agree with there. But I think the fundamental question is, look, I've been around big trucking. I saw it firsthand. There were periods of unseated trucks. This is a big problem when you've got assets. The concern, because of the cyclicality of this industry, the common answer, Louie, that I hear from folks on your side of the table, and I certainly am going to hear on X, because I get a lot of hate whenever this conversation comes up, is, by the way, it's Max Fuller, not Craig Fuller, if you want to direct your messages that way. But the common comment is, stop treating us like slaves, stop treating us like a commodity, and pay us a living wage and pay us better. The counter argument to that is that the cyclicality, the seasonality, this is a brutal business where we have so many new entrants that have come in. It is hard to raise wages and keep them consistently high and sort of address your unseated trucks when the market does not support that. And we've seen so many trucking companies that have tried to do the right thing that could not survive because they couldn't respond to the market. I mean, it's really the reason that the union carriers have gone under is because they didn't have flexibility in their workforce. What do you say, Lewie, to that?
I agree with you. I mean, this is a race to the bottom industry, unfortunately, whether you're a small guy or a big guy. I mean, let's face the facts. I think shippers and receivers, and I'm not trying to be mean here, but they need to wake up to the fact, along with brokers and other, because it surprises me how much you will load $100,000 or $1 million or $50,000 worth of widgets on a truck to send from, New York City to LA across the country, and you don't even have an idea who's behind the seat, who's driving the truck, and really then the whole thing comes down to, you don't care how good that carrier is, how good his drivers are, how his safety record. All anybody seems to care about is who's the cheapest. And that's how you get it. That's how you get freight. You don't get freight. I mean, sure, with small things like myself being a small carrier, customer service comes into matter sometimes. But most of the time, the way you get your foot in the door is you do it cheaper than anybody else or the other guy. And that's crazy when we really sit back and think about it. Who else runs their business? What other industry buy? Who's the cheapest? You know, it's kind of, other than maybe the government, you know.
Now, the government does not say who's the cheapest. I mean, look at how much the government pays for screws and all sorts of nonsense.
Right, but so my point is, you know, it comes down to the cheapest bidder and all these things, you know. And unfortunately, that's sad. And, you know, I also blame DOT and FMCSA because we need a much higher barrier of entry. You know, I say this a lot when I go speak. I've said testify in Congress. What other industry can you go out here on the street, find some homeless person who doesn't know anything about trucks or anything? Maybe they don't even have a driver's license, but you can get them a driver's license. You can send them to a CDL school, pay $300 some bucks and get them some authority and find them insurance and get them a truck. So you take this person off the street, and within 2 months, they could be a motor carrier owning a truck running down the road. And have no credit or anything. That's crazy.
Look, I completely agree with you. I mean, it is, there's so many things in this industry, but ultimately it's because trucking freight is a commodity. And the sort of counter argument, and look, I understand how fleets think. The counter argument among fleet owners is if they can't control the revenue because the price fluctuates with the market, they've got to control their variable cost, which is the driver salary. And it's all about unit economics. I mean, running a business is about how do you manage your unit economics. It's the most important thing you can learn in being an entrepreneur is managing your unit economics. But the market conditions are the problem. And I will say this. We have seen a pivot. I watched the testimony with Chris Spear in Congress back last summer, where he was calling at least you and me both out, I think, at least one of us, about how there's a truck driver shortage and you can't have increases in salaries and in a recession and not be a shortage. The counter argument is he was talking about Teamsters because they represent a significant portion of the BLS survey data. That's the counter argument. But it does feel like the ATA has realized the errors of their ways, at least in this driver shortage narrative, short term, we'll say, where they have pivoted and said there is no driver shortage. It's a qualified driver shortage. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that hearing he was actually sitting right beside me, so he's probably talking about both of us.
It's you. I'll let you take credit, although he's come out and written some stuff about me. And posted on Facebook. Come on, dog. Like, your weekend nights are posted. I'm probably got some, glass of wine sitting there just angry posting on some journalist, dude. That, first of all, I'm flattered. Second of all, come on, man.
But I was sort of shocked at that hearing myself because I felt like they doubled down on it at that one. But since then, yes, they have kind of changed their tune. And, I don't necessarily disagree that there's probably an experienced driver shortage. In fact, I've said that myself because we can't keep them in the industry. That's why we don't have a driver shortage as per se, because we have all these people coming in and churning out. They stay a year and a half, and they're gone. So they're probably not sticking around long enough to get the proper experience. I mean, that's what I tell my folks who sometimes, we got some small fleets, and they want experienced people, and they call them, well, we can't find drivers. And I said, it's because they don't stay long enough. And,
it's hard. So Max, let's talk about this, because Lewie brings up an interesting point is, the reputation of larger carriers, these are just a cycle of bringing people in and out. And they talk about the fact there's a turnover problem. You've ran some of the biggest fleets in the industry. You certainly have seen all stages of a fleet. Why can't these big fleets, what was really holding you guys back from really holding on to the drivers?
Well, I think part of it really goes back to economics. And I think he really mentioned the cost of paying a driver what he should get.
So why don't you just pay? I mean, when you were at your express, why wouldn't you just pay them more?
Well, you're in a business where you want to make a profit. It's not that you're trying to maximize profits. You try to balance to where you get a reasonable return on the investment that you made against all your cost. And driver was one of the major costs.
Lewie, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, look, trucking's not a super profitable business. You can look at the largest public carriers to see, with all the advantages that the biggest carriers have, they're still operating in the mid-90s. I mean, U.S. Express was, I think most of its life as a public company was a 95, 96 OR. I mean, it's a difficult business even for the largest fleets. I know you guys have come out and talked about, pay them more, treat them not like commodities, but when you've got a large fleet and you've got this nasty cycle that you've got to contend with, how do you recommend that large fleets handle that? And maybe it's not your problem. Maybe your message is, hey, we represent small truckers and that's your problem, not ours. How do you think about that?
No, I understand. And, I own a bunch of trucks. I own one truck per time for myself that I drove. I understand. No, there ain't a lot of profit in this business. It's a tough business. It's hard, and I get it. And owning a lot more trucks is just a lot more problems. And I think what we all need to do as an industry, whether small or big, is we need to continue, one, to educate our shippers and receivers and push. And, we can't stand for this drivers giving time away. I think that's where drivers lose so much money. From our surveys and studies here at OOIDA, we're 20 to 30 hours a week. The average over-the-road trucker is just sitting at a loading dock waiting to load or unload, and they don't get anything for that. And, that's sort of where OOIDA looks. We push this whole overtime and removing it from the Fair Labor Standards Act where drivers can get it, because that's what we see. And Max may not agree, and that's fine. But the way we see it happen is if fleets are forced to pay the driver time and a half, fleets are then going to be forced to go to the shipper and receiver and say, load my truck. My driver and my truck is no longer your warehouse. And, I know there's a cost to it, but there's a much less cost to a big fleet when that trucker is sitting there, because they're not paying the driver unless he's rolling. So he's just sitting there for nothing. When that becomes a cost to everybody, then things we think feel like the worms will turn. And, the way I look at it, if shippers and receivers would load the trucks and they're not giving away the 20 to 30 hours a week, that's less trucks we need, because drivers are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, is driving up and down the road.
Yeah, if you actually look at the situation, it's how we charge customers is the problem. I mean, even a lot of customers won't even pay detention when they're tying your equipment up for X number of hours. If we were compensated by the hour, then it would make this whole equation a whole lot simpler, both for the trucking company and also for the driver. But if you look at the way it is today, the trucking company doesn't get compensated for a lot of that extra time, and we actually lose utilization on our equipment. The way to solve that is either raise the rate or get rid of the customer. You mentioned customers not letting drivers use the restroom. Well, we would identify those customers, and in some cases, we'd eliminate the customer from our list. Partially because I couldn't find drivers as easy as I could find other customers. So we're trying to force our customers to at least treat their drivers with proper respect. And one comment that Craig made, talking about carriers having a 95 or 96 operating ratio, that's operating ratio. It's not net income. If you really look at the cost of capital in this industry, you probably have to have, and people may disagree with this, at least a 92 or 93 operating ratio before you're really at that true break-even point.
Yeah, I mean, cost of capital is a huge piece of it, yes. Investing in your fleet. I mean, it's a difficult, brutal business, Lewie. Last final thoughts on how do we fix these problems? Are we all coming together as an industry? Are we going to see the ATA's pivoted with the idea that there is not a driver shortage, at least now? I'm waiting for Bob Costello's new version of the chart. We'll see that. Maybe it's qualified drivers. I don't know how they're surveyed. We'll get that data. But we're waiting for that. But are we at a point where this industry, where you and the ATA and other parties are coming together to solve things that we really want to solve, which is like truck driver parking, the ELD changes, the ELDT changes? Do you think we've reached a pass where the safety, security, and economic crisis is so significant that we're going to have movement?
I hope so. I feel like it, and I think the ATA they've dropped off this driver shortage. Us and them are, of course, in talks together about raising standards. I mean, everybody in trucking is finally locking arms, whether it's brokers, us, everybody, on how we need to raise the standards, pushing DOT and FMCSA over there to do such things. I think it's good that we have a DOT and FMCSA that's now out here listening to truckers, actually getting out of Washington, D.C., going out to see how our trucking industry works, both small fleets, big fleets, everybody. So, yeah, I think that so much stuff has come to a head. I mean, we still differ probably on autonomous vehicles. We differ on some of the safety technology and stuff like that that's needed, but and probably driver pay a little bit, but some of this other stuff, we are starting to work together a lot more and getting along a lot better. So, and that's how things, like it or hate it, when everybody from trucking can agree on an issue, we can usually get it across the finish line.
Well, Lewie, I got to ask, is there like a red phone between you and the ATA where you guys are like talking? Do you meet up? Do you hang out?
We have conversations once in a while. I mean, they got my style and I got theirs, and
it's like an intermediary, like institution that's somewhere in Washington D.C., like they do between when we have enemies. Anyways, Lewie, really appreciate you coming in. We'll have to have you back. Lots to debate, lots to talk about. We'll be right back with Freight Expectations of Matt Leffler. We're gonna get his take on whether there's a truck driver shortage. That's my opening question to Matt.
Huge thanks to today's OTR sponsor, again, OTR Solutions. They believe the right partner should know your business, understand your goals, and be there when it really matters. It's no accident that OTR boasts 4.7 stars on Google. They know that excellent customer support is at the center of every relationship. With responsive teams, industry knowledge, and a commitment to long-term growth, OTR gives customers more than service. It gives them a partner designed to help their business succeed. Learn more again with OTR.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Welcome to Freight Expectations. I'm here with my co-host, Max, who's joined us for Freight Expectations today right after. Well, this is still FreightWaves Today. It's still part of it. It's the special segment. It's the most special segment of the week. Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney. I got to ask, we had Lewie here. Is there a truck driver shortage?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And we really have to take a long view of this.
Such a lawyer. That's, first of all, I asked you a direct question, sir. I want a direct answer.
Yeah.
None of this lawyering. You sound like a politician. Is there a truck driver shortage? Yes or no? No, yes or no. Is there a truck driver shortage?
There is no truck driver shortage.
Boom.
There is no truck.
That is the clip. Say it again. There is no truck driver shortage.
I mean, here's the reality, though. I mean, we are looking at the after effects of something that took place over 46 years ago. In 1980, the average truck driver made, adjusted for inflation, like $120,000 a year. Compared to today, the average trucker's making, let's say, $50,000. That's over-the-road motor carriers. Now, the reality is there's not enough people that want to do that specific job for the compensation and the benefits and the work environment that is currently on offer. That's not the case for companies like Old Dominion or Pitt, Ohio, the LTLs that do pay their drivers hourly. But what you see is this tension with, I have 10 people that I hired last year and 11 of them quit. And this is a churn that the big over-the-road full truckload motor carriers have been living with for decades. And that's part of the recipe. That was the intention behind all of this. How do I keep costs low to get things delivered ever faster and ever cheaper? And now we live with that. Now, there is no truck driver shortage at all, but there are pockets that have challenges. Sure, maybe they go into construction, they go somewhere else, but that is not the phenomenon you see with a lot of other types of truckers, like food delivery companies or fuel companies. That's not a question that they really get focused on. But this is the world we live in. Now, when we had Chris from up north from the Volvo dealership, there is absolutely a shortage of qualified heavy-duty technicians, and we need way more of them, especially as the technology gets more sophisticated every year.
So, I mean, how can we have a shortage of technicians and that not be offensive, but the truck drivers are not, there's not a shortage of those?
It is so hard on your body to be a heavy-duty technician. Many of us will remember who are watching this right now. There were shop classes in high school where you could learn how to work on cars. You can learn to work on equipment. They don't have those anymore. People don't understand the opportunities in transportation that exist. The big mega carriers don't have the resources to hire some high school graduate to come fix equipment. They need people who have some level of experience. But if you have the aptitude or the attitude, you can do really interesting things. But there's a challenge. We have told people that if you're a diesel mechanic, you're not a successful person. And some of the most successful people that I know are mechanics that have spent their lives fixing commercial vehicles. And every year there's new technology. Every year there's new sensors, new parts, all these issues, and yet they still show up and do it. But there is no doubt that we have not done a great job helping people understand what types of careers exist for them if they want to get into heavy-duty repair and maintenance.
Well, a lot of that's really changed over the last 20 years. You know, when I was in school, they were teaching how to change spark plugs and things like that. You don't have spark plugs anymore. You know, all that's changed, and it's really gone towards electronics, and that's been a big shift over the last 10 years, is more electronics, more computerization, more sensors, And all those things, require different type of technology to understand.
Why do we have a tech shortage? Why is there a tech shortage? If it's computerized, it's supposed to make things easier. Does it make it more difficult? Or what's the gap?
This is the really interesting part and kind of a sad part of the industry. So when you were a diesel mechanic, 20 years ago, you weren't using a computer for every single thing that you did. Maybe you'd have some sort of diagnostic tools, but you were using your hands, working with your parts diagrams, all of these things that you learned over your entire career. Nowadays, and I'm not kidding, if you were doing an inspection on a trailer, just a PM on a dry van, you may actually be hooking up a computer to that trailer. So every truck, every service you do, you have to have a computer to do the work on those things. So a lot of older technicians are like, I don't even know how to email, let alone to do diagnostics on the laptop and get all these troubleshooting reports. So some of them left the industry, or they went to work for municipalities or places with just different types of constraints. And then the younger people come in, they go, I want to be a broker. I want to be whatever. I don't want to be working in an area that has no air conditioning, that is heated in the winter, that is dirty and rough on your body. And so you have this pathway where the older, more experienced technicians don't like the new world that they live in. And then the lower entry-level technicians think, I can go work at Costco, maybe make some more money and not be so brutal on my body. Because you get a technician who's been doing this in their 40s or 50s, you can see it on their knees, their backs, their shoulders, their necks, their hands. It is a difficult thing to do. And so that's part of the challenge. We don't have entry-level platforms for people to get into the business. It's all really community college driven or for-profit installations for doing training. But that's a big challenge that we have. And we need a lot more technicians if the promise of automation is going to be coming, which absolutely will be.
Yeah, I mean, look, air conditioning is the most. There are a lot of people the air conditioned on X, but you make an interesting point, which these jobs. There's also been this emphasis in Congress, we use student loans, and the idea that to be respected member of society, you have to get a 4-year degree. There are pressure. I have this conversation with my wife all the time. Is that we have our 19-year-old son who's going in to be a sophomore, and I'm like, I love Baylor, where I went to school, and I understand why when I was going to college that was important, but it doesn't feel like it has the same value that it did at one point, because the jobs are no longer requiring that, like what you're learning in college. And it feels like the stuff that actually does matter to our economy is the technician side, is the maintenance side, is the driver side. But this is a societal problem, Matt.
This is the story of how our industry has been so terribly neglected. You look, again, before deregulation, in transportation, whether you're a mechanic, a driver, a dock worker, material handler, there's a good life for you, likely a pension, likely benefits, and that's not what it is today. It's a different world today than it was 40 some odd years ago. But the same problems are here. The stuff needs to be functional. It's got to work, got to be corrected. And that's an interesting thing that Lewie talked about from OOIDA's perspective on drivers not being compensated. When they're waiting, they don't get paid because they're driving by the mile. In some shops, not all, but some people don't realize this. Some shops, you are paid on a flat rate, meaning if a job only pays for 5 hours and it takes you 10 hours to do it, you're only going to get paid for 5 hours. No one's going to pay you for why you couldn't do it in the time the book said. So as people learn about, let's say, dealership mechanics specifically, if it's a flat rate shop, you might come into there and say, oh, I'll work 60 hours a week, but I'm only getting paid for 30 or 40 because I'm not fast enough. So there's this pressure on every part of our supply chain, which really kind of goes back to the idea of how can I get you to do something and not have to pay you to do that thing.
But that's the counter argument, Matt, and this is a study. So FedEx had this problem where the night sort, they were missing, it was not as efficient. In fact, I read this study this past weekend, was the fact that they were paying them by the hour and they found that they couldn't fit the sort. All of a sudden they changed the pay structure basically by shift, and guess what? Packages got sorted much faster. I think the counter argument on the hourly pay is the fact that if you want to increase efficiency, your incentives need to align to that. So, I mean, if there is really a problem and a delay, aren't you better off paying on a per job basis versus per? I'm not taking any money away from
from the mechanics and the maintenance folks, but I would much rather pay more to get my truck out of the shop faster than to pay on a per hour basis. Is it an incentive alignment problem?
Well, ultimately, it's every shop functions differently, Craig. So when you're talking about dealerships specifically, dealers will have networks of dealers that are independent businesses oftentimes, and they've all agreed to this way of invoicing and how you pay for workers. That is not the case with the aftermarket. That is certainly not the case with the fleets. Most fleets will pay their mechanics as W-2 hourly employees. That's almost always the case. But what ends up happening is, just like with trucking, you get this idea in your head that it's all like this. And so over-the-road trucking is a good example of this. Oh, it's tough for an owner-operator when it comes to finding parking or finding a place you can use a restroom, and that is absolutely true. That is not the entire industry. That is a small piece of a very big industry. Same goes for mechanics. If I tell somebody who's in high school, hey, you can make $50 an hour at a dealership, and you're going to work 50 hours a week and probably only get paid for like 30 to 35, they'd be like, I want nothing to do with that. But a master mechanic who can say, I can do that job in 2 hours and the book time is 5, I'm getting paid 5 hours and I'm working for 2. So there's a lot of incentives, and people just need to understand, what are my options? What things am I able to do? And once they know these things, the doors open up. There's incredible careers in this industry once you realize like how ridiculous and siloed all the different parts are.
Yeah, it's not just this industry. It's actually construction and home building and kind of across the board. I think what we've done is we've encouraged our kids to go to college, get a degree, and we forgot about all the technical trades, and that's where the shortage is today, not just mechanics. One thing that you were talking about is mechanics. We would spend 20% of their time training them to new technologies. And it was constant. You had to, because things were changing so fast. And a lot of people coming into our company, basically, they had basic training, but they didn't understand the highly technical stuff that we were getting involved in, like collision avoidance and things like that. They didn't understand it, so we had to train.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point you bring up, is every single year, the truck that you bought last year is different. It's a different supplier. There's different technologies, and their OEM will do their best to help kind of help you understand what those technologies are. They do provide training, but as a diesel technician, if your mind is not geared towards continuous improvement and understanding new things, it's brutal. I mean, when the DEF stuff started coming down big on the after treatment emissions things, we saw a massive flux of mechanics. We're like, I want nothing to do with this new technology. So you get this interesting level. And I think what I would encourage people to think about today is, we know autonomous trucks are coming at some place. That'll happen at some point. But the mechanics are still going to be human beings fixing these things. They're going to still be the ones on site changing the tire or the mud flap or the light or calibrating whatever LiDAR sensor the OEM has put into that truck. So this industry, heavy duty mechanics, your skill is transferable anywhere in the world. There are people who would hire you to go anywhere. So you have a lot of flexibility if you're competent and you have that aptitude to continually educate yourself on all of the brand new technology that will never stop coming.
The thing, Matt, that I think's got to change is this public awareness and appreciation for these blue collar jobs. I mean, Max mentions construction. It's a great job, but look at the energy sector. There's fantastic jobs that pay really well in the trades. The conversation online is HVAC repairmen, electricians, plumbers, truck drivers, maintenance folks. I mean, truck drivers are getting an honest, are getting to a point where they can make a living wage again because the market is allowing it. And that's a totally different topic entirely, because it, as the industry makes more money, as there's this capacity shortage, you got to pay up for drivers to get it because there's freight to be moved. But we've got to ultimately look at these industries that are far more attractive in a world of AI, where attorneys and frankly media people can be replaced by a computer. It's the jobs where there's physical labor that can't be replaced. That's what's got to change, is the narrative.
I mean, this is exactly right. What jobs are going to be available in the future are going to be things that are only capable through human beings, and that's going to be mechanics and repair technicians. There's no doubt that path continues. The thing we have to do as a society is be more honest with young people and say, look, there are jobs that you think you want to do. You want to be a professional YouTuber, may not work out for you, but you can certainly turn a wrench and keep equipment well maintained on the road every single day. And we continue to move a lot of things. I mean, we talked a couple weeks ago about this, Snap-on acquiring diesel laptops. There's a ton of money in the repair and maintenance industry, whether it's diagnostics or parts or whatever else is out there. So it's a really great time to get into that part of the business, even though we have a lot of other things happening all around us.
So Matt, I mean, you taught college. You were a university professor, an adjunct professor for Michigan State. You have young people that they're taking these courses about law and transportation law. But I talked to a number of folks in the university system, and it is an absolute crisis because of AI. Not only is there an erosion of potential job opportunities for young people, but the entire curriculum and the integrity of the education system is being compromised. I mean, this is a crisis for so many university professors. How do you respond to that?
This is an interesting time. It's never been easy to do any of these things. I think being a professor, what allows me to do is stay abreast of what technologies the younger people are becoming familiar with. And that's really helpful. We know that the way we work has changed profoundly over the last few years. You can do anything, anywhere in some cases. But the things you can't change are when you have to interact with the physical world. When the digital world interacts or intersects with the physical world, that has to have a human involved. Whether that's autonomous track inspections, well, if they find a defect, you're sending out a human being. Or if you have a waiver for the triangles for a breakdown of an autonomous truck, there's still going to be a human being that's going to come and service that equipment. So even though we look at the world changing in unique and profound ways, it has always been this way. Everything always changes. And as you kind of unpack this stuff, you go, well, what are the opportunities that will exist in 5 or 10 years? And those are going to be things that involve your hands, skilled trades. Those are not going to go anywhere. You can't have a robot do that yet. I'm sure the robots are working on it. So if the robots are listening, I'm on your team. But still, we have a lot to follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of just, I think the incentive structure has got to change. The universities, I mean, I write a very large check to Baylor University. It's insane how much it costs to do a tuition check. My son got a scholarship, but I'm still writing this big check. And I think a lot of it's just this gamification where they have a very high bill rate and then they give you a scholarship so you feel important. But the reality is you still are writing a big check, and that's the issue. And like, I just, the incentives are incorrect. I mean, you look at educational inflation, the two most regulated industries in terms of government funding and regulation, healthcare and education have been on an absolute tear. And frankly, both of those industries are, white collar technology, information services industries that we should see those costs go much lower, but it's not happening.
No, and universities are not on the hook if their graduates can't find jobs.
There's no return on investment. Yeah. Like, that's the problem. Like you said, there's no ROI. There's nobody to prove that transportation attorneys make a lot of money.
And we've seen, to your point on the education costs rising, those are not going to slow down. And many years ago, you could actually go bankrupt and you could discharge those federal loans that you took on. Those are not dischargeable in many cases now. So you have this pathway where these universities take on enormous amounts of money, students take on enormous amounts of debt, and the jobs they think they're going to have are just not able to even pay off the debt, let alone give you an apartment or a car. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, and that's why these schools that focus on actual jobs that require your physical intervention, those are things that are going to stick around. General contractors, roofing folks, people who do tile work. That's a skill set that is declining across the board in every state.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to get, when we come back, because we're going to go right to break, and we'll be right back. Matt, we want to continue this conversation. We got some Supreme Court decisions. Plus, I want to talk about just what you're seeing overall in the legal framework. So much to get there. Stay with us.
Race car car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
Welcome back to Freight Expectations. Matt, we're going to get into some of these Supreme Court decisions. There were two big decisions. The Supreme Court, and by the way, someone who doesn't track it that closely, I don't know that the Supreme Court has been this relevant to at least our industry that it has been recently, but is it just because the administration is really trying to push the envelope on a lot of these rules and trying to change things? Why are we hearing so much about the Supreme Court this year where it doesn't feel like in past years? It always seems to be one or two big decisions by the Supreme Court every year, but not like we're seeing just back to back. And maybe it's only because it impacts our industry.
No, I think you're right. I think what we have seen happen with the Supreme Court this year so far is all of these cases that have been percolating from when Trump got into office. So when President Trump got into office for the second time, the goal was clear: push boundaries, push norms, see how far the executive branch can reach. We had the learning resources case. That was the one about IEEPA tariffs, and that got overturned. But what's happened right now, what is happening right now, is all these cases for these actions, whether they were dismissals of workers or new types of ways to put tariffs together, they've all gone through the appellate process, and they're all getting in front of the Supreme Court right now. And so this week had the decision on the slaughter case, which is incredibly important. But yeah, you're seeing all these cases, and it's not just for our industry, it is for every industry. We are talking about these laws that have been in place for, in some cases, 90 years being overturned. So it's a very interesting time. We'll call it an interesting time to be a lawyer in the United States.
You know, there's this whole concept of every 70 years there's a cycle change in sort of American psychology, and like you've seen it with the Trump's
victory or elections is sort of viewed as this sort of pivotal moment in history that does repeat itself. And there's this entire concept about that. It goes back to Kennedy, one of the writers we actually had on stage, where he writes a book about every 70 years there's this major sort of crisis that the old systems don't work and the American institutions don't work, and we need to sort of not necessarily change the Constitution, but overturn the way that society operates. There's been a lot of disenfranchisement with people that were sort of left out of the last system, and it sort of forces this new change. Is that what's happening across all aspects of society that's causing this, or is there something more fundamental happening that's bringing the Supreme Court to bear?
I think the Supreme Court, what we're seeing right now at the Supreme Court is what these people who are part of the Federalist Society, this originalists, most Americans don't know this, but there are legal doctrines that have been fighting for many, many decades. And one of those fights was about this idea of the administrative state. Could Congress pass a law that creates a federal agency that has the power to create laws, draft laws, investigate, enforce, adjudicate, all of these things? This was a novel approach 100 years ago, and for 100 years, people have been fighting it. Different legal theorists have been battling this idea that you can grow the federal government with these agencies that aren't really part of the executive branch. They're kind of like the judiciary. They're kind of like Congress, and those organizations grew in explosive ways. I mean, many people, and I know Max will know this case, but the Chevron case, it was 40 some odd years ago, which gave deference to these agencies in ways that the founders could never have conceived of. And so what has happened now is you have a majority on the Supreme Court that is deeply skeptical to certain parts of the New Deal and the new American century that people have been thinking about. So now these cases are getting in front of the judges or justices, and they're not afraid to make big sweeping changes. The old days, you'd look at a case and say, that was decided 50 years ago. We're not going to revisit it. It's decided law. But these justices look and say, it was decided wrong 50 years ago. That's why we're going to reverse it now. And we are watching this trajectory that many people kind of anticipated and many people have been fighting enormously for a long time. And that's what we're witnessing. We're witnessing a very conservative Supreme Court dismantle a lot of the assumptions we had over the last couple decades.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see the changes that are taking place, because some of these things that were common practice didn't really make sense. And I think some of the changes that Supreme Court is basically deciding is giving us kind of a new life to go forward.
It's going to be really interesting, Max. I think for a lot of Americans, as we think about let's take one specific case. This is the Slaughter case. This case was just decided. And here's the kind of the background. An agency exists. This is the FTC. And the FTC has these people that run it. And those people that run it have a term within that position, and they can only be terminated for a very select group of reasons. Essentially, you have to show cause for getting rid of somebody. And this kind of was a compromise, because if I'm Congress and I'm going to give you all this power and you're going to use that power against the American population, what check or balance do I have? And one of the checks that they put in place was a very specific language of how you can fire somebody. Well, President Trump doesn't believe in that particular regulation. His belief, and this is a belief of many, both Republicans have this belief and Democrats have this belief, certain groups do, which is there's a thing called the unitary executive. And what that means is if you're the president, anything on your payroll is something you can control. You can terminate anybody. Any check or balance put on by Congress to limit you is something that they find deeply off-putting and ultimately, in this case, unconstitutional. What does that mean going forward? What that means is that a 90-year-old precedent that said, if you have a job and you are not performing your job, you can lose it. But if you're performing your job, you can't lose it. That is gone. Now it is at the pleasure of the president, whether it's President Trump or some future president. That power stays in the branch. And so the Slaughter case, again, just a couple days old, will likely be one of the most profound Supreme Court cases in America more generally, because this tension of what power you give up and what power you keep is being answered by the Supreme Court. And they're saying the power that creates the agency, if there's some check or balance that might stop you from firing them, that is gone. So every federal agency that has people that have these similar protections, those protections are not going to be very strong, which goes exactly to what happened to Surface Transportation Board, where Robert Primus was terminated, not given a reason for that. He's been suing for reinstatement. This Slaughter case tells me you're done. There's no pathway back to getting reinstatement. This is a very pivotal moment, and we'll see if Congress reacts or if this newfound power stays with the president until, another 250 years from now.
But Matt, at the same token, we had the Federal Reserve decision this week where the president could not fire someone that was on the Federal Reserve Board, one of the governors, which is counter to that argument. So it looks as if, and again, this is my read on it, again, not being a Supreme Court expert by any means, is that the Supreme Court decided that there are certain rights particularly when it reports up to the executive branch, the president should be given power to do that. Versus other rights where you have an independent institution that is sort of understood to be independent of influence from the executive branch, where they could, he couldn't actually decide to fire. It was Lisa Cook, I think, was her name. What's your read on that?
This is the most exciting part. So I get excited about this. This is a great question. And here's how I would answer this. So let's say someone just lost their job at this agency or some alphabet soup, and they say, Matt, what can I do? Can I get reinstatement? The question you're going to ask that potential client is your agency more like the FTC, or are you more like the Federal Reserve? And that's the new test. If you're like the FTC, I'm sorry, you don't got a job anymore. But if we can make a really strong argument, historical, national bank, all the Federal Reserve, maybe you have a pathway. But all this boils down to the real thing that you see as an American citizen going into 250 years of independence is the executive branch this week has grown expansively. Now, that's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It doesn't matter what you really think about it. The reality is you need to understand it. And what that means is that any person appointed to an agency, maybe confirmed by Congress and has this protection status, it is not there anymore. It is not.
But isn't that the role of the executive branch of government to govern ultimately these institutions, FTC as an example, you could argue DOT, these are cabinet positions that, look, I didn't take constitutional law, but I did do the 101, the American, whatever we had to do in school. These feel like they report to the executive branch, and they feel like they should be the power. He is the CEO of the government. Shouldn't he have the right to do that? I get the whole bank thing. Let's put that aside because that's a totally different thing. But when it comes to actually, we're talking about whether this could be a Democrat in the office is the same risk, right?
Yeah, this is the question. The way I would frame this for anyone who wants to really understand this particular issue. Imagine your worst political enemy gets the power, and the day they step in is they fire everybody who is politically opposed to them without giving any reasons. Now, do you want that? I don't know. But the reality is the same kind of vein that we see, or the thread being pulled by the Supreme Court right now on cases like the Slaughter case, is that there are members of the court, and there's not a majority of them, but there are several, that fundamentally believe all federal agencies are unconstitutional as they sit. They should just go away. So this is a kind of a new version of, we've deferred to the agencies for such a long time. We get Loper Bright, it gets rid of Chevron. We have Slaughter. Now you can fire people without having to give a reason for why you fired them. And that is within the domain of this president. And it is clearly a legal and constitutional thing to do unless the Supreme Court changes hands, which I don't see happening, or Congress passes a law, a stronger law, which again, I don't see happening. So I do tend to agree with you, Craig. This is the power of the presidency. But what we are now going to face is that every election, every new president has this new tool in their toolbox that they did not have before. And whenever you have new tools for executives or new tools for legislators, we as Americans want to understand what is it you're going to do with it, and how will that impact us long term. It's going to make things more interesting, that's for sure.
I don't know. I just fundamentally believe that the person that we elect, and again, Democrat, Republican, and I voted both. My ticket is not regardless of what you read online. I'm not a strictly conservative voter or Republican voter. I feel like it's the president's opportunity. He is the executive. He is the chief executive officer of the United States. He should have the right. I mean, it'd be like me saying I don't have the right to, South here is doing production. I don't have the right to fire him. I don't have any reason to fire Sal, but I also should have that right. And it feels like if I don't have that right, how can I possibly do my job? That's the big dichotomy. By the way, I was looking this up as you were talking. It's George Friedman, not Kennedy. I don't know where I got that. Maybe the Kennedy School. I think he was involved in that. Kennedy School of Government. But George Friedman wrote the book about these cycles, The Storm Before the Calm, which is about every 80 years, 50 to 80 years, the United States goes through this sort of crisis where the old institutions don't work for us. It went from American, 250 years ago, we had the founding fathers, and then we had the Civil War, and there was this massive crisis, and then you sort of fast forward, and then you have the FDR and the New Deal. The old system was not working, where we had almost no government and no regulations, and we saw what happened in the 1920s, where it was just a free-for-all. The financial markets all melted down, and we got the New Deal, which created massive employment. We built the institutions that have driven us since the post-World War II period, where there was a lot of faith in the institution. And then he argues that system's broken. And Donald Trump has risen to prominence because of the frustration and American disenchantment with these institutions. In fact, in his book, he argues that the reason that there's so much hatred and so much anger is because people were told that these were competent people in government, that we believe and we were taught that these were institutions that had competence. I've worked with government. There are competent people in government, but as a general rule, government is largely incompetent. Many parts of government incompetent. And I don't believe there's a massive conspiracy to the degree a lot of people do, because I've seen how incompetent some of these rules are.
Don't use malfeasance to explain what can be done with simple just people being careless. I tend to agree with you. I think for most Americans right now, as you get excited for the 4th of July, understand that this country and your countrymen share a lot more together than you might expect. If someone wants you to hate the other side, clearly there's some motivation behind that. We agree as a society. Heck, even you agree, Craig, with Jason Miller on 95% of things.
We've come together. It's the biggest, by the way, Matt, you brought us together. You're sort of the Qatar, I think. Qatar was the one involved bringing the Iranians, right? Pakistan. You're the Pakistan of trucking.
I want to have success. I want my friendships and my integrations to be successful. But I think the thing to get excited about is this is your country at work. There's never been a better time in my lifetime or anyone's lifetime to be an American and to watch our country continue to excel and lead in a whole bunch of different things. There's a lot to be frustrated by. There's a lot of things to get cynical about or upset about. But there is so much to be pumped and energized because the future is coming, and it is very interesting. So it is great to see these Supreme Court cases impact our industry, and it's really interesting just to see people care about this stuff, because half the time people just don't care, and I can't help that. I can't teach you to want to care about this stuff.
I think people care because their lives have been impacted by it, Matt. And look, if you don't like, if you believe that these institutions should all be done with, what you end up with is near anarchy. And you could argue that the DOT and the FMCSA prior to this administration did not care, was not doing their job. That's what happens when you don't have a regulator, when you don't fund these departments, that when you underfund the FMCA's job, is very hard to do because they're just underfunded. I don't think people who watch this, you want some level of regulation. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. It just is.
Oh, 100%.
Well, America 250, happy birthday. We're so happy that you're, and so proud of you as Americans. We will be back next week. On Monday, we're off tomorrow. We have a fantastic lineup, as we always do. Please join us next week and every single day for FreightWaves Today at noon Eastern.
Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how